In progress.
Oh, shoot. Let me see here. Sorry about this. I have technologically impaired here. So let me share my screen real quick. And there we go. Okay. Good morning or afternoon, depending on what time you're watching the show today. We're talking about lost person search, its common profiles that we're going to encounter, and initial actions and how we're going to handle this situation to try to take care of the people the best we can. So why do we do this? Why are we taking time out of our day instead of training on search and rescue or, a fire problem or an EMS issue? Well, these are both of those, to be honest with you. But the reason that we're doing this is because we are making these calls. We're making calls for the lost persons or the persons who walk away. Last year, by pulling data, it shows that we made 11 calls for this. And critical wandering and missing people just in general are on the rise, and they're projected to rise exponentially over the next 20 years. There's lots of reasons for this, and we'll cover that in a few minutes, but expect to make more of these calls. The other issue is we're dealing with high-risk people. A lot of the people that we deal with in this are going to be autistics, Alzheimer's, dementias, despondent people, or people with some mental issues that they're working through. These people are at risk. A lot of the times they can't take care of themselves and they won't last long on their own. So here we come to save the day. Another reason is these are highly technical incidents, not so much in that we're hanging off buildings or we're running into the towering inferno, but we're dealing with some stuff that we've got to really think through and deal with multiple agencies. So this is a mission that is manpower intensive and a high degree of coordination is required. We're dealing with agencies such as police departments, other agencies within Hamilton County, Butler County, EMA. We could be dealing with state and federal assets as needed. So we've got to coordinate those and manage our own mission at the same time. The last reason is, excuse me, is this is pretty much science-based. A lot of the profiles that we're dealing with have been scientifically proven out, and they do actually work, which is kind of surprising the way it was done, but and as you can see, the projected missing people, wanderers, is going up exponentially. It really is increasing. And part of the reason is people aren't sending their folks to secure critical care facilities as much as we thought they would, for a lot of reasons. One of them, of course, is money. It's very expensive, as you all know, to send somebody to Chesterwood or Barrington or someplace like that where they can receive the care that they need. Super expensive. Another thing that we've seen is there's a cultural thing as well. Some cultures don't send their elderly, it's gonna sound bad, but away. So especially like some of the Middle Eastern and India cultures, they'll keep everybody in the house. Some of the Hispanic cultures are the same way. But at the same time, they got to make money to run the household. So the household people go to work and sometimes have to leave the elderly or the person in need at home by themselves. And that's, of course, where things happen. Of course, they wander, they get out, they do all kinds of stuff. So that's kind of where we come in. And those are some of the reasons that people are wandering away and not going into skilled facilities. Here's our objectives for today. We've already done the first one, identified the need for missing and lost persons search. Next, we're going to go into the profiles that we deal with. So what I did was I got rid of a bunch of the profiles that we don't really use, such as like the Hunter or ATV. They were in there because we could come into that here in Westchester, but quite honestly, we don't. So what I kept in was the Alzheimer's, dementia, autistic, and the despondent. So that should move things along pretty quick. But in honesty, that is what we see. You might ask yourself, what about kids, children? We're not really seeing just straight kids wandering away from the house. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't happen or it won't happen, but we have that information available to us, certainly. But those are the common profiles that we're going after. The other thing I will say about the profiles is that sometimes it's not cut and dry. You have to cut and paste and mix two profiles together and come up with an action plan. So there is a little guesswork to that, but we'll cover that in a minute. We're going to identify the stages of the search mission, followed by what we're going to do when we get there, our response actions and planning for the next step. We'll touch on some tactics and techniques, and we're going to talk about documentation. And then at the end, we're just going to cover a few things that we've learned the hard way, both good and bad, that we've done, and how we can improve on those. So little lessons learned here. So that's pretty good. Jumping right into our behavior profiles, we'll start off with autism. We've dealt with autism before. This is not real new for us, but autism is a lifelong disability. It doesn't go away. It seriously impairs the way that the brain processes stuff sent from the senses. And oftentimes people confuse an autistic person with a retarded person. Even though we're not supposed to say retarded anymore, it's a common thing that people think. This is not any form of retardation in any way, shape, or form. Basically, what it is the brain can't communicate. The brain and the senses are breaking down the communications, and then it translates into some different behaviors that can present in a myriad of ways, and usually none of which are easy for us to deal with. So these people, the autistic person, obviously I just said it has problems communicating, but they have problems communicating with each other and people, right? In general, they're very quiet. They lack the empathy. They're easily overstimulated, be it by a siren, people screaming and yelling, any of those stimulation things that will completely freak them out. Or it may not, but it does a lot of times. And they very likely will run. They like to be alone. They are very routine dependent. They do the same thing every day, every time. So, and I'll touch on that in just a second. A lot of times folks with autism aren't afraid. They're not afraid to walk into traffic. They're not afraid of water. They're not afraid of trucks and cars and all those kinds of things that can hurt them. So that is something that we can use to our advantage, as well as we really have to watch out for. One of the ways that we can use vehicles and so forth to our advantage is, especially some of the younger autistic folks, is they love lights. They love flashing lights. I was about to say disco balls and so forth, but that's not really around anymore. But flashing lights are an attractant for some autistic folks, and that's something that you'll find out with your missing person questionnaire. If you can get that, that may be an attractor, and you may be able to use that to your advantage. They like reflections a lot of times. So you might see them looking into windows, and what they may be looking at is their own reflection in the glass or so forth. Now, where that can bite us is they also have a huge affinity to water. And it is not unusual for missing autistics to be found drowned. And one of the theories is that they're looking into the water, as checking out their reflections and the like, and they go in, or they just straight go into the water to do water stuff. They also some of them like transportation. So you can use that to your advantage as well. They may be attracted to fire trucks, ambulances, police cars, trains is another one. And all these come with also hazards as well, right? But if you know that that subject is interested in trains, he or she is fascinated by trains, it would probably behoove us to get to somebody to an area where there's trains, if that's part of the issue. Likelihood of them responding to you is not real good. You can yell and hoot and holler their names and so forth, like we train you to do so, but they're probably not going to respond. So just be prepared for that. You'll have to watch them. And if they're startled or they see you or they think they're in trouble, chances of them running are extremely high. They're going to take off on you. So you take that into account as you feel the need to approach a person like this. Most of the time they are found statistically, they are found in the urban environment. Most of the time they live in the urban environment because that's where their care is located. And they're found in and around structures. So if you have to target an area, look around buildings, inside and outside buildings very closely. One of my experiences with an autistic person is my neighbor across the street is a pretty high functioning 35-ish old male. And we've kind of formed a relationship over my dog. I have a 2-year-old dog who's very friendly, and I walk the dog several times a day and just getting out. And he knows my schedule. So I usually walk the dog after Jeopardy. So about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, I'm usually doing my final walk with the dog, and he expects me to be out there. And if I'm not, or my wife isn't going to walk the dog at that time, he's pacing back and forth, whether it be at a window, looking out the window, waiting for Major to come out, or during the summertime, he would pace in the front yard every day. So, it kind of shows a routine and how much he expects things to be routine. Our communication is very limited. He pets the dog. He doesn't say anything to me usually. I'm actually surprised usually when he does talk to me. So, but he'll run right out into the middle of the road when he sees Major coming out the door, no matter what's coming up the road. Luckily, we live on a very quiet street. But yeah, so he checks a lot of the boxes on this autism chart here. This chart here shows a couple of different names of disorders, the spectrum disorders that you might hear, especially when you're doing your missing person questionnaire or just in general. Asperger's, that's a popular one that we've seen quite a bit. Childhood what are the demographics for autism? Almost all the time they're males. Males are actually 4 times more likely to have autism. And basically what it works out is 1 in every 110 births has an autistic issue. And that is going up. The last study that I saw was it's going up by 10 to 17% every year, which is kind of scary in a way, but it is something that we're going to see in the future. Increasing in our contact with these type of folks is going to go up. There is no racial, ethnic, or social boundaries on this, so pretty much everybody can get it. Sorry about Siri there. And here's kind of what they do. They usually don't like contact. They'll withdraw. They won't come out to you. It would be very surprising if an autistic person came to you and said, "Hi, here I am." And when they do, their social skills are terrible. And that sounds like I'm saying bad, but they're not going to socialize. They're not going to talk. You will see that they have language disturbances. In some cases, when on the rare occasion that Frederick does talk to me, it's hard. Excuse me. It's hard to understand him, and I really have to work to have a conversation with him and talk to him and understand what he's saying. They do sometimes have repetitive body movements, just They may withdraw if you touch them. If they do let you touch them, they may withdraw. They may do some unusual, what you might think is unusual things, but body movement wise, but that's just how they are. And then they may have some behavioral issues, especially in terms of resistance to change. Like I said, very routine oriented people, and they have emotional responses when something changes. I think you guys have all probably dealt with an autistic person in your EMS time. It's the same thing. Just, treat them with kid gloves to a certain extent. As it pertains to search, 97% of the time, these folks ran when they were spotted or were approached. As we talked about, they're easily overstimulated. They like to be alone. They are not afraid. And a lot of times they are undersensitive to pain. So they may be injured and not realize that they are injured. They may act like they're deaf or unresponsive, but they very likely are not. They may be, but they're not oftentimes. They just may not be responding to you. If you need to approach these folks, be very cautious, be careful. I haven't had any experience where an autistic person has attacked or been overly aggressive, but they can be, especially when they feel that they're pinned in an area or they're unhappy, very unhappy. So just be aware that can happen, and that they're attracted to lights, transportation, and water. Water is all in capitals because it's a killer. So a lot of times these folks are found in water if it's available, and that is never a good ending. If you need to approach these folks, or you find the folks, sometimes it's a better option to hold back and to maintain a perimeter and assure that they're not going to hurt themselves. So one of the examples that we had here in Westchester was there was an autistic child up in District 75 who got out and was a runner. Actually, Chief Brooks located the child, and he was sitting in a front yard playing with a sprinkler. He had the water attracted him, and what the tactic was with that young man was we held a perimeter so that he didn't hurt himself. He didn't run into traffic off of Knights Knoll or one of those areas. And we waited for his mother, caregiver, to come up and approach the child. That's the expert. It may be mom, it may be dad, it may be a sibling, a counselor from school, or one of the other facilities. That may be a better way, is to let that person approach and for lack of a better term, secure that person and make sure they're safe. And then we can deal with the EMS challenges from there. So where are these folks found? Like I said, most of the time they're in or by a structure. Then it goes down from there. The next popular is water. So we have water here in Westchester, as you're all aware, between retention ponds, straight up ponds, pools, all those things. Some of the areas have water fountains and features and so forth. Take those into consideration, and that may be someplace that you want to send a hasty team to, or get somebody to that location to verify that child or person isn't there. Then the next down is they're found in fields, open areas, woods, that kind of thing, or wandering along a roadway. Usually they cross the roadways, they're not going parallel with the roadway. 96% of the time they're found uninjured, and they have a high survivability likelihood due to the fact that we get out and we search for them very quickly, and we escalate that search profile very quickly. All right, next one that we're going to talk about is the Alzheimer's dementias. Again, this is another common group that we go out on. And sorry, it's going to get loud for a second. Okay, so Alzheimer's and dementia, this is not an unusual thing. We know about it. We've dealt with it a lot. It is a progressive disease that affects the brain. How does that affect? I'm sorry.
Attention medic 74, person hemorrhaging, Huntington Circle, 5050 Huntington Circle, cross state landmark 4640974.
So how does that affect search? Well, they lose the cognitive mapping abilities in their brain, and situational awareness is out the window a lot of times with these folks as they progress through their disease. Some of the things that happen are wandering is common. They can become violent when confronted, or just in general. And sometimes little things will set them off. There'll be catastrophic reactions to all different kinds of things. Then there's also sundowning, which oh boy. So sundowning is another part of this profile, and is really the reason that I got into search, is because my father-in-law in his later years was slipping into dementia, and really was affected by sundowners. We found him wandering down Pleasant Avenue on the way home from my wife and I on the way home from someplace. And when I say he was wandering down Pleasant Avenue in Fairfield, I mean he was wandering down the middle of the road. He was headed down to see his wife, who'd been dead for years, and it was a giant mess. But luckily, we were there and we got him. The police helped out a lot and were very understanding. But as he progressed, in the evening hours, he would become very confused, and he would start acting out in various ways. Some days he would be happy, some days he would be hunting Nazis, some days he would be ready to go see his wife at the funeral home. She'd been dead for many years. So what sundowning is just unusual behavior as the sun is going down in the evenings, and it can be very challenging. And when that person is also wandering, now we have a big problem. So that's something that you may come across out there. This slide here shows some of the related disorders. Obviously, Alzheimer's is the big one, and we deal with that. As you guys know, Chesterwood and some of these other places have secure areas for these types of people, but you also have vascular dementia, Parkinson, Lewy body, Huntington's disease. I'm not even going to say the next one because I'm not going to be Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, maybe Pick's disease. That's not our assistant chief. And there's all kinds of other things, brain injuries and so forth. But as you can see, Alzheimer's is the big dog in that whole thing. So when these dementias and Alzheimer's wander, oftentimes they will go in a fairly linear route, often veering, but they go until they can't go anymore, whether that's because they run into a barrier or they physically can't do it anymore. It appears that these folks have the inability to turn around and go back the way they came. So there have been people, and I can think of a couple in Hamilton that have just walked right into fences or to walls in an alleyway, and they can't physically turn themselves around to turn around and go back. So they'll stop and they'll stay right there at that fence or at that wall. Sometimes they sit down, sometimes they just stand there, but they can't go back. So usually, we talk about people doubling back and maybe heading back home. That's not going to happen for the most part in these cases. They're often very oriented to the past. So how does that help us in the wandering situation? Like my father-in-law, he was oriented in the past, and he was going to the cemetery where there was no chance he was going to make it there. He also tried to wander back to one of his previous businesses. He worked at Diebold in Hamilton for years, and he was going back there. He was walking back there more than once. And as you know, Diebold isn't there anymore. So he wasn't going to make it there either. It was across the river and so forth. But he was so oriented to the past that he was headed there. It used to be said that these folks would not cross a busy road, and that is totally not true. That has changed. They may cross busy roads. Father-in-law going down Pleasant Ave. or they may wander down a road. They'll go parallel with the road and veer off wherever they see something bright and shiny. Wherever they go, but they're not just limited as they were in the past. Again, these folks are also attracted to water, not as much as the autistic guy or gal, but it does happen. Again, often attempts to travel to former residences or favorite places, like we just covered that, but where can we use that to our advantage? If during our interview with the family or somebody who knows them, that we know that the subject likes to go to McDonald's or goes to the Dip or one of a favorite place, we can send people to that favorite place, maybe a law enforcement or somebody, get them down there and see if they're there, or backtrack from that location, maybe even to see if we can locate the subject. Very rarely do they leave clues. If they do, it's probably clothing. They may drop every old person is wearing a sweater or too many clothes because they're cold all the time. They may shed clothing. So you might find something like that, but it is fairly uncommon, rather, I should say. Oftentimes they will also not respond to shouts, and they're not very likely to cry for help either. The study shows that happens about 1% of the time. Okay. I do know that one subject in Hamilton was located that way. She had walked into an alley and again, walked into a dead end alley and was up against the wall, couldn't go anywhere. And some residents in the building next to her heard her basically crying. And that's how the call to 911 came in. Excuse me. What gets these folks is the elements. So usually what kills them is hypothermia, drowning, and just dehydration in general. So this is an EMS intensive person that we're going to definitely have to evaluate. These folks are also found usually around structures, roadways. So when you're doing your drive-by searches, your windshield searches and the like, definitely you're going to have to get out of your vehicle and check things like drainages and little offshoots or places that you think that somebody might hide. 10% of the time they're found in the water or around water, woods, fields, and then linear features, walking along roadways or paths or ridge lines or something like that. That's pretty unusual anymore. I think 9% is probably a little high. How does this relate to us in the search world? Well, with rapid activation, 80% of the time people were found uninjured. These Alzheimer's folks are found uninjured and really will have limited EMS contact. They'll still need to be evaluated, but they may not need the full workup and transport. 98% of the time, EMS is going to be required to check them out. Their level of consciousness alone will probably dictate that they need to be evaluated. So the medics can go from there and do that. 80% of the time, this is interesting. 80% of the time they're found within 2 miles of the last known position. So that helps us with search planning and getting people out to where it needs to be. Does this happen here? It absolutely does. We just had our last search was a dementia Alzheimer's profile for person who wandered away from the house, was found down in Reading after many hours of being out and about with some injuries, but it does happen here. And that again was another cultural case. They were from the Middle East, and they don't put their people in homes. So he was at home by himself and got out. So that it does happen here. Here's your survivability chart. So basically, the quicker we get to them, the more likely they are to survive. And after about 48 hours and 60 hours, the likelihood of a positive outcome drops drastically, right? Injuries can happen all the way from the top to the bottom, but it's usually more likely that they're uninjured, or unfortunately, we find them after they've succumbed. It's just how it is, unfortunately. So the trick to that is rapid activation of personnel and assets. This one just kind of breaks down. It's interesting to see that these issues really kick up in the summertime into the fall. It's cold outside. Nobody wants to go outside in November, December, January, February. I don't want to go outside when it's like that a lot of times. But during the summer when it's nice, everybody wants to be out. These folks are no different, and our incidents go up drastically. The next one is despondence, and really what that is a person who is depressed, wants to do harm to themselves, maybe commit suicide, is tired of it all. It could be somebody also who is just wanting to get away from people. They may or may not want to do harm to themselves, but by the definition, they do. This almost always starts as a law enforcement issue. And then moves on through the investigational process. The key to that is investigation process continuing through the whole thing. Even though we're doing all of our search thing, it's very important, and the police are very good at this, to keep that investigational process going, to see where they might go, what their motivations are, and all that. The other part of this is there is an elevated risk threat, or an elevated threat. As we know, suicidal people can be homicidal people. So when we're dealing with these things, we have to work very closely with law enforcement, and be prepared for the eventual problems that come with violence. So take that into account as you're approaching these people and are looking for them. There are two patterns to this profile. Most of the time, these folks don't want to be seen. So they get away from their last known point, but they're often pretty close to where they are reported to be missing from. But they hide, basically, is what that says. Especially in the urban and suburban environment, they're close by. Oftentimes they're watching us. And we just had one off of Beckett Ridge Boulevard that was, the guy was right in the weeds, not far from the command post, watching the whole thing. And he was found because one of our firefighters, and I believe it was Jason Cook, was really on top of it. And he heard some clapping in the wood line there, and went to investigate it and found our subject. So great job by Jason on that, and listening. But these folks are often very close to our area. The other way they may go is they may seek out a specific location, maybe someplace that is nice, pretty, has a great overlook, might be meaningful. Maybe it's a grave marker, or some place that something happened, or they met their girlfriend or boyfriend at a certain location, and they may travel there. That is one of the, we don't like to go down that path, because a lot of times, statistically, that's where they've picked out that they're going to kill themselves. So suicide is a big thing there. People go to their happy place and they kill themselves. Often it's a park or a wooded area, but it could be anywhere. And that one usually expands our perimeters significantly. On the average, it's up to 8.1 miles away from the last point scenes, or the initial planning point. That's what IPP is, initial planning point. So the question always comes up, are they lost, or are they not lost? Well, that's a good question. Sometimes these people don't want to be found. You know, they've wandered away for a reason. They're not like the dementia, the Alzheimer's, or the autistic person. They just don't want to be found. They're tired of being with people, and they're out in the wind. So that's a fine line that we walk. And that's why this is a very heavily law enforcement based profile. They are typically located near structures. Again, 47% of the time. Age and sex doesn't have any impact on this profile, but they do have a fairly high mortality rate. The studies show about 35% of the time we don't have a successful outcome on this one. These are folks that are not going to reveal themselves to you. very likely they want to be lost and not found. I guess is the better way to put that. They don't want you finding them. They may be worried also about being in trouble. All of these may these profiles, the person may be worried about getting in trouble, and that is something that you as a responder or a finder will have to reassure them of. With these respondents, there's a good chance that they may have weapons. So I know that we approach most people with knowledgeable of the threat, and we keep an eye on that, but these people oftentimes have the means and the wherewithal. Maybe they're planning to take care of their own life. They may not be afraid to take care of yours as well. So be ready for that. Utilize law enforcement. This may be another good tactic for instead of making hard contact with the subject, to hold back, kind of keep an eye on things, and call for some additional resources, whether it be police or counselors or whatever. The police are highly trained in this. They do a great job with their negotiation skills and all that. So let's let them handle the approach for the most part. This slide here just shows where they're found based on statistics, structures, road, waters, and then out in the middle of nowhere, drainages, fields, woods, and sometimes along the roadway, but not usually. They're usually hiding. Survivability, 31% of the time, statistically, they're found dead. 15% is injured, and then luckily 54% of the time, so a little over half, they're not injured, and oftentimes they can be talked to and brought out safely. Oftentimes these folks will require some EMS evaluation, whether it's transported or not. We had one not long ago up in District 4 again, luckily, based on investigative techniques. An engine company, a police officer figured out where she might be going and got there, and there she was. The police evaluated her and waived off the EMS, but we did make sure that the EMS was available if needed. So we're good there. So the next section is the stages of the search and how it pertains to us. So when somebody goes missing, oftentimes there's a 911 call, or maybe a crisis center calls dispatch and they report that the person is missing or has walked away or whatever. 911 operators try to get the following information. They want to know who it is. They try to get a description to the best of the caller's ability, how long they've been gone, where's the last place they were seen, and unusual circumstances or medical issues. But they have a whole list of questions that they ask. It's simpler to our EMD. They do the same thing for the police in this case. So this begins as a law enforcement problem. And as I said, by the ORC, it is a law enforcement problem. They get there, or they're dispatched there, and they start doing their part of the investigation. Now, I will say, in the last year or so, police and fire have worked very well together on this, and they are requesting assistance from us way more rapidly than we used to, which is awesome. Sometimes even before they get on scene, they're calling for additional resources. And what they're doing is they're basing it on their resources, what they have available, and the information that they get. If they get that this is a critical missing person, they'll start us coming their way and to help them with the investigation. But again, this is a law enforcement mission, and we have to work. We work for the police in this case, so we are a support unit for law enforcement in this mission. The best part about this whole thing is 70 to 80% of the time, the police handle it. They figure it out and they located it. That's fantastic. So the remainder of the time, though, what we try to do is get rapid activation of the additional resources so that we can get the plan rolling. Again, investigations are usually based on law enforcement, and then law enforcement calls for us. So the standard is Battalion 70, an engine, district medic if they're available. Sometimes though, you get these weird dispatches, and we just have to kind of kind of roll with it. You know, they may just call for the battalion. They may just call for an engine. Our plan is the battalion and an engine and a medic. Just to be on the safe side, we can always turn them around, and then we can always upgrade it as we need to. So the next phase is getting that information. Information is power. You know, we've said that many times. Get as much information as we can and the circumstances surrounding the missing person. So if the circumstance, an example of circumstances where if say a teenager is having a bout with his mom or his dad, and you know, whatever, he or she runs out, mom or dad may not be the best person to make contact with that person. They may want to talk to somebody else. So that is something that you just have to work through with the police and take into account. It is a great idea. If you can get a picture of that subject, to get it out to your companies. So what we've done with some success in the past is we've asked for a picture, take a picture, snapshot on your phone or the battalion phone or whatever, and then we've sent that out to our crews that are going out into the field to do the searches. That is a huge advantage. So if you can do that, that's a great thing. Finding out what has already been done to locate the person. So we ran into an example of this. We ran into this in Trenton. We went for a missing person who we knew pretty well. We've been out on that subject a couple times, but one of the times they had everybody and their brother was running around on ATVs looking for this person. So we had to struggle to get people corralled in a little bit. But what we did was we found out where they had looked, and because they had local knowledge, we really utilized those people, and they were a great asset once we were able to kind of wrangle them in. The lost person questionnaire and search urgency assessment form. If you can do that, get that going, that will greatly enhance our success. The lost person questionnaire is a form. It's about 2 pages, 3 pages. And basically what it is a descriptor. So there's a bunch of questions on it, and I have an example of that coming up here, but it just asks questions so that we can get to know who the person is and helps us provide data for the profile. More information is good. The search urgency form and assessment is a good tool to have if you're not sure if you want to escalate this mission, or if you can handle it with what you got. This form is very good, and there's an example coming up with that. And it is basically like filling out the Glasgow Coma Scale. It's the same standard, and if your numbers add up, it tells you how to escalate it. And these forms are located in the battalion car. There's a file folder. It's located underneath the whiteboard in the back. I ran out of space in the other compartments, so that's where it is. All those forms are in there, and please utilize those forms. And it's a critical thing that we use those forms that we do there. Hasty searches are very likely in the beginning. Maybe not true hasty searches. They may be more of a windshield search, but law enforcement, they're very good at this. They'll figure out where people are likely to go, and they go to it, and they'll go check those places for you. For example, if for a child, they may go to the friends' houses and check and see that people are at the houses and so forth like that. Or, you know, if we know that somebody likes to go to McDonald's, for example, we can send a police car, or the police may already be on their way there to check McDonald's or those kind of locations. The key to that is meeting up with the police commander and tracking where these people are, where their people are, and where they've been, and where we need to get to next. So once the police figure out that they need help, they call for us, right? We just kind of covered that. The first 2 responders, they get to the location, and it's important that they meet up with the police commander on scene. Now that could be a patrol officer, or it could be one of the captains, or anywhere in between. Set up that unified command. And what we found is very effective is pulling the battalion car right up next to the police commander's vehicle and working out the back of both of those apparatus. And then when the drone cars get there, that's a whole nother thing. So we can and we'll talk about that in a minute, but that's good. It's very important that we set up that unified command. It can be tricky to get that working, but once it does, it is very effective. The other part of that, and it's on a later slide, is coming up with a common communications channel. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So what we're going to do next is find out what's been done and what needs to be done. We're going to fill out that lost person questionnaire if it hasn't been already done. That is probably not going to have been done. Law enforcement, they don't have the form. We're working on that, but they operate differently than we do. So in the search urgency form, multitasking is a big deal on this, as you guys well know. All right, so this slide shows the basics of the lost person interview report or lost person questionnaire. The one we have in the car is a little different than this one, but it's the same basic principle. Basically, on the top is just your basic mission information. Then we get down into descriptions, last place seen, what kind of health problems they have, or if they have any, what they're wearing, what their outdoor experience is. All those questions get answered, and based on that, we can build a profile and also answer some of the search urgency questions that may or may not dictate whether we need to ramp up the incident or maybe even demobilize to a certain extent. That's the search urgency form. Like I said, it's very similar to the Glasgow Coma scale. You pick a value and you write it out on the edges, add them all up, and basically at the bottom, if you have 10 to 15 points, you need to really up your game and get more people coming. In the 16 to 27, it's a measured response. That's tricky. You know, you have to kind of walk a fine line and work with your law enforcement group to kind of come up with a common agreement there on that. And then anything higher than the 28, it may just be let the police do their thing and investigate it and just be ready for them, be there as a support operation. Once we've established our search urgency, early notification and getting resources on the road is essential, especially when we're talking about groups like the Technical Rescue Group. You know, we can get boots on the ground, but it's going to take some time to get them there. Maybe as much as an hour to get a solid force there. So call it early and often. Additional resources. There's a lot of good stuff around us, right? Hamilton County USAR is an option. The multiple drone units. There's the drone unit out of Hamilton County. They've come up several times with us. Also out of drones out of Oxford, and other air assets are available. Dogs are available to us if we want tracking dogs besides police dogs. We'll talk about police dogs a little bit, but sometimes the police are not real. They're hesitant to use police dogs because what do police dogs do? They bite bad guys, right? We don't want to bite somebody that we're searching for. So oftentimes the way it'll work is there'll be a discussion whether they want to use a dog for a track. And they may go to the family and say, hey, this is a police dog. He may bite, she may bite. You know, are you okay with us utilizing this dog? And of course, they would always default to controlling the dog, but you know, it happens. Sometimes the family says no, sometimes the family says yes, but those dogs are with challenges. But there are also search dogs available to us. There's a dog out of Ohio Task Force 1 that lives in Norwood. And then there's several close in Indiana that we could get if we would like those type of dogs. So there's a lot of resources that we can get coming, not to mention additional mutual aid companies if we need ground pounders and so forth to do those ground checks. Send out BOLOs and other law enforcement information. You know, as companies are coming in, give them the description of what you're looking for. If you can broadcast that picture out via text messages or whatever, do so. You may, I'm checking into it, I'm not sure, but I think you can upload a picture into CAD. If you send it to dispatch, they can throw it into the CAD and bring it up on the MDTs. That is something that we're working on. Secure the last known place or the place last seen. if we know where that person was last seen, try to lock that down. That way we can secure any clues or anything like that that may still be there, footprints, whatever. And that brings us down to protect any obvious clues or scent articles. So example is somebody like the old lady Alzheimer's person stripped off her sweater that she wears every day, every place she goes, and we find that on the ground. That might be a good article for a dog to take a sniff of and may be able to pick up a track. So we might want to do that. and assemble your maps and figure out how you're going to track this and provide for your responders, knowing where they're going and all that. That can be tricky and is very incident dependent. So our initial task is to search the immediate area in detail. So the rule of thumb is basically a quarter mile, 300 meters around the last known place or place last seen. That is not always possible. It may not be 300 meters, but we need to do a search of that area to see what we see. It's not unusual that person is in that area or is very close. So, or has left something, some telltale sign that a direction of travel or something like that. So that area needs to be searched in detail, including like the shed, areas around pools, things like that, looking for the subject and or clues. The other thing that has to happen, and this is very critical, is a detailed search of the facility or the residence where that person was. So believe me, this is a lesson learned the hard way for many of us. Searching that residence is imperative because oftentimes they're still hiding in there someplace. So the police will often do a search of the house, and they do a great job. They're police officers. They search like they're police officers. Just like we search, when we search a place, we search it like we're searching for a fire victim. Police are very focused on smaller stuff. They're used to looking for drugs, they're looking, or some sort of warranted item, something like that, and very focused search, whereas we look more globally, right? We're searching rooms for a person. So oftentimes it's a good idea to go back behind the police officers and do a search our way, right? Now, it is also very important that we make sure that the police understand that we are not doubting their abilities, that we are looking at it from a different perspective. And oftentimes it's even better to do the search with a police officer and a firefighter together and go through the place. And then you get that global and specific, more honed in, focused view of the whole area, right? So what are you looking for? You want to look anywhere that a person might hide. So do we need necessarily to go through drawers in the credenza or whatever? No, probably not, depending on who you're looking for, right? But if you walk into a bedroom and the mattress is tilted one way, you probably should look in between the mattresses, under the beds, stuff like that. Check the attic space, check all the closets, and just do a good, thorough search. I'm not going to tell you how to do a search. You know how to do it, but just do a very thorough search. In some of the classes that they try to get us to understand this, they say do it like you're searching for drugs with a warrant. You're not necessarily going into the drawers, but really focus and be very, very thorough in your search and document that as such. You're looking for clues, you're looking for contacts. Sometimes you might find phone numbers in different places. You know, we had a little lady walk away, I believe it was in Oxford, and we found her phone list on who to call, her daughters, her best friends and all that. And we were able to provide that to the law enforcement, and they started going down that list, and they got a lot of good information out of those folks. And we were able to find that lady going to an ice cream shop. So that was a very successful mission. But that search of that facility or the residence is huge. And if you have to search a nursing home, it's going to take more than one or two people to do that. So just keep that in mind. Initial searches, hasty searches of the immediate area. So a hasty search is just a real quick kind of down and dirty search. It is not done from your car or from an ambulance or from a fire truck or the battalion car. You actually are physically on the ground checking the area out. Okay. You're checking on anything that you can find, direction of travel, footprints, anything that might give us some information on which way or what that person might be thinking or doing. And you're hitting those high probability locations first. Okay. And part of that, you know, a lot of this is intuition. A lot of this is knowing how to play hide and seek. Well, before cell phones, we all played hide and seek or played kick the can or ghost in the graveyard, and we all had to hide places. Well, think about that. How you used to hide, or where would you hide if you were in this situation? And then based on the profiles, that might give us some more probability, high probability locations. Anytime you have a pool or water feature or anything like that, get people to it. Get that checked out, because that is one of the biggest hazards that we're going to come up against. So, and it's also probably the most deadly in the search world, next to freezing to death. Here's something that we really are working hard to improve, but it's something that we have to take into consideration as the mission unfolds. Accountability. We need to know where people are going and who's with whom. And that's tough. It's tricky, and we haven't done a great job at it, but we're getting better. We've put processes in place to start doing that. The briefing. So once we figure out what's going on, we get a kind of a game plan together. Oftentimes it is a good idea to pull our resources back into the command post area and do a full briefing. Not a long briefing, a full briefing though. Circumstances, why the person walked away or what's going on, medical history, description, intentions, any safety information that we can glean. You guys have been through briefings before. It's the same kind of thing, but we're including all of the agencies, or as many of the folks that we can, into that briefing. Now, that doesn't mean we have to have everybody into the briefing. If we're running down high probability leads or something, those folks may need to stay in the field. Law enforcement on containment may need to stay in the field. There are other ways that we can get that information to them. Might be through cell phones, might be MDT blasts, stuff like that. But this basically puts together the whole plan, lets you know what's going on, and divvies out assignments as from there. And then we start executing the assignments. Some other tactics that we can use is containment. This is a great thing if we have law enforcement available. Basically, if we know that they're in an area, we can try to lock them into that area, right? This is a great tactic. It's been very, very effective. And there's several ways to do it. You can use natural boundaries. You can put police cars on the corners. You can put units along roadways and so forth to try to keep them inside that area. It's a tactic that you can use. It's been fairly effective, especially with Alzheimer's, or not Alzheimer's, I'm sorry, autistic folks. They're either attracted or they'll stay away from it. That may be useful, but to be effective in containment, you've got to know that they're in that zone. So that is the downside of that. All right. Attractive destinations. We've talked about this a lot. Where is that person likely to go? Where do they hang out? Especially if they're kids, you know, are they still at their buddy's house playing video games when they were supposed to be home by 9 o'clock? They're still, you know, maybe somebody didn't check, maybe the kids were hiding. Go to those places and figure out where do they like to go? Where do they hang out? Who is it? Know your subject. That's where that missing person questionnaire is super critical. That gives a lot of that information and can provide that to you. Areas likely to be visited based on the profile. We talked about that. And likely hazards, pools, bodies of water, highways. We had that young guy up in District 5. I don't know where he's at. We haven't been out on him for a while, but what he used to do is escape and then use the drainage tunnels underneath I-75 to go back and forth between the Maud area, like the Islamic Center area in that area, and Knights Knoll and the Kingsgate area. So those are areas that you need to check and make sure that they're not there. Once you know the kid or a person, that makes it a lot easier. And why do I say that? How are you going to know these people? Well, the police department is very good about adding notes and so forth to these people. They have a database that they keep in-house. It's their in-house system, and it lays out a lot of this stuff, and it has been proven to be very effective. And that's one of the questions that we ask the PD commanders is, do you have any history with this subject, or any history at the house? And a lot of times they've been able to provide good information. Sometimes they don't have it, but a lot of times they have. Clue management. In the suburban and urban environment, it's just not as easy as in the wilderness, or it's here. It's not unusual to have candy wrappers laying around, or shoes or whatever. But if you're wandering around in the wilderness, if you're in Yosemite and you find a bunch of candy wrappers in somebody's shoes, that's kind of unusual. That's not the same thing here, obviously. Some other challenges that we have is broadcasted descriptions will elicit false sightings. So that has happened in the past. You know, we put out not necessarily us here in Westchester, but in general, put out a description over the media, Facebook, you got to watch that. And that could, you could get false sightings from that. So while those need to be investigated 100%, they need to be checked out. We cannot stop doing what we're doing and searching the way that we're searching. Don't commit all of our resources to that sighting. That has bitten agencies in the butt before. Let's not let that be us. And keep in mind, any part of these things, especially clues, can be part of a criminal investigation, or have to be admitted as evidence for whatever, right? So when we find a clue or we find something, it is imperative that we work very closely with law enforcement and talk to them about how we want to handle the clues. And that is very dependent on the situation, right? So it would be nice that we could say 100% of the time, this is how we're going to handle clues. We can't do that. So what we would do is we would communicate that with our law enforcement partners, and they would come up with a plan, and we would do that. It might be that we document what we found, mark a waypoint on your GPS, and move on. Or it might be that it might be very sensitive, and the PD wants you to stay there, keep that evidence secure until they can get appropriate people out to you. So we have to play that one as it comes a little bit. Excuse me. And then the chain of custody. Again, that is something that we're working with the police for. We do have a form for clues and the like. At the minimum, mark it in your logs so that you can put it in your report, and mark it on mark a waypoint on your GPS so that we have something for documentation in the future. That here is the clue report. That is also located in the battalion car. You can keep track of things. I don't expect that you would have that in the field, but if you do, that's great. You can fill it out. If not, make a note on your notepad or wherever that here's what you found, where you found it, what time you found it, and all that. Again, mark that waypoint and move on, or not, depending on what the police say. Now we get down to documentation. We're getting there. There's only a couple more things to talk about. The door-to-door logs. So we do have a form. It's called an urban interview log. You can write on it who you made contact with, where you've been. That's great if you can do that. Certainly if you make contact with somebody, and especially if they give you any information at all, make a note of that. The resident, if you can get names and phone numbers, that's great. Resident at such and such location, or contact was made at such and such location. This is the information that they gave us. That's great. So keeping those logs or some form of reference is imperative. Get that information. Other documentation that we're going to use is map segmentations, tracking on GPS units. So once we get resources there, we're going to send the groups out with GPS units. The active track will be on, and that is one of the ways that we track where everybody's been. And we enter that into the report, and a lot of that is based on, unfortunately, litigation. So we track where everybody's at. That ensures that we've done our due diligence and we've done everything we can to find that subject. Waypoints. So like I said, if you find you find something that you think might be a clue, or maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Put a mark on there, add a waypoint. You can import, excuse me, clue found, whatever, sweater found, whatever, radio that in, of course, and mark that down. And what we do is actually, Lieutenant Asbrock is really good about this. He gets into the GPS units, downloads them into Basemap, and we have that record for documentation. That's very important. Actions taken. So we're going to talk about that again later on. We're not doing 214s. Some of you probably remember when we had to do 214s every day or on Fridays. We may, depending on the mission, we may have to do 214s, and that is a unit log and what you did and what you did. If nothing else, put that into your RMS reports. Always think about crime scene. Is this going to be a crime scene? Is this going to be a body recovery or a body find? Think about these things. If you're coming up and there's drag marks, lots of footprints, try not to disturb those footprints, or definitely not the drag marks, right? Come in at angles on that, follow that in, just document the crap out of it. That's all very important. And when it all boils down to it, it's just like an EMS run, right? Document everything that you do. Think about it, then do it. Everybody sues everybody anymore, right? You can be sued for anything. Well, search teams have been sued because they didn't find a person, and for various other reasons. And documentation is really the way that we protect ourselves from that situation, right? As we try to do everything we can in Westchester and our surrounding communities, we're very good at this, at doing everything. We're not so good at documenting it. So really take that time to document it out. It would also behoove you to have a little notepad or a piece of paper where you can make notes on it as you go through your search. That is an example of the urban interview log. As you can see, just make a note of the address, contacted, residents' names, blah, blah, blah. You can read that. And if there's a suggestion for follow-up, yes or no. What this slide is showing here is one of the ways that we documented areas searched. Now, this was before we were using Google Pro and some of these other Google Earth Pro and some of these other things. What we did was we listed our resources up at the top and just used highlighters and showed who went where and what was covered. And this was out of the back of the battalion vehicle. And we eventually did find a subject, but that subject was walking down Townsville Road towards map number 10, and law enforcement found him, did a great job. So here's some more techniques. Institution checks. That's a big one, right? So that usually happens on the back end where the guys, us tactical level folks, we're not doing it, but oftentimes when we get more resources to us, somebody calls the hospitals to see if that subject is in the hospital, or jails, prisons. Did the county pick them up and take them to jail? Stuff like that. So those go on in the background. They're not usually done by our level in the field. Hasty searches, we talked about that. It's getting out, checking out high probability areas, right? Running the pathways, going to high probability, high acuity areas. We get those done. Vehicle and windshield searches. All right, that's exactly what it sounds like. Somebody is driving around the perimeter or driving the neighborhoods or whatever and just looking. That is not necessarily getting out of your vehicle. Where you should get out of your vehicle in these cases is when you come across something like a drainage or a culvert, something like that. You should definitely get out and take a look in there, see if they're hiding in there or if they're down in the culvert for whatever reason. That's a good example of that. Ground searches, that's exactly what it sounds like. It's people on foot, ground pounding, looking, walking through backyards, checking the pools, checking the sheds, making contact with the residents, and being out and about on that. The last one we have recently added in is aerial search. Helicopters are still an option, right? So, and we have used them in the past. State Patrol, county helicopter. We've used Air Care. Now the big sexy thing right now and is very effective is the UAVs or drones. We have had drones on multiple missions here, as many as 4 different drones up in the air at the same time. That is a nightmare and is also a very awesome thing. They are often utilized, have FLIR, night vision, all that kind of stuff, and also lights, powerful lights. The one out of Oxford has a big light on it that is very effective, so you can pinpoint something if need be. Very effective. Some search techniques: attraction, visual, and audible, right? So we always encourage the searchers to be out hollering, saying, calling their names, talking to them, trying to elicit some response, as well as listen. We talked about Jason Cook hearing the guy clapping in the wood line, and then locating. Great job. Visual attraction, we talked about that. Sometimes parking an ambulance or a fire truck or a cop car with its lights on can draw them in. There was a guy with who was really into trains that we figured out that's what he was interested in. So we sent people down to the railroad track where the locomotive was, and sure as enough, there he was. That was out in the county. Dog searches, we talked about that. Trailing dogs are the most effective, and that's what you can get out of Ohio Task Force 1. The guy out of Norwood. I believe there's one guy in Deerfield, and there's also some folks out in the border of Indiana, Ohio, that we can get those dogs in if we need to. EMA has quicker access to those folks, and we would use them as we could. Here's helicopters and UAVs or drones. Getting them on the road as soon as possible is critical, especially with the helicopters. It takes time to get pilots in, get it spun up, and get those assets launched. And then you also have to deal with things like timing out and range and fuel and all that kind of stuff. The drones is a little easier, but they're still coming from someplace. Now, this is a plug for the police department's UAV program. We've utilized them several times. It's very effective. They do a great job. They are automatically dispatched on most technical rescue hazmat incidents, as well as multi-alarm fires, I believe. And they may come in off duty, but they may be on duty. Their vehicles are pretty sweet. If you haven't seen them, they have big TV screens in the back. So what we've done in the past is we pulled that car up next to where the command post is, and we've monitored exactly what that drone is seeing. We can watch it via a map too. It's very cool and very, very effective. They utilize FLIR. The big spotlight cams that they have on there are pretty effective too. They're not big spotlights, but they're powerful. So the ones we've used have been out of Hamilton County. I believe it comes out of Woodlawn. City of Oxford police they come down very frequently. They're very good at what they do. And also, of course, the Westchester guys, I believe that Hamilton County or Butler County Sheriff's Department also has a drone operator that is available to us as well. As you know, helicopters operate off of lat lawn, so you may need to give them some more specific information at their request. They may want to know exactly what grids you want them to search. But a lot of times, the Air Care pilots, they have a pretty good idea where they're going, and based on radio communications, we can put them into an area. The positive with the helicopters, you can also use them as an air evacuum or medevac situation if we need to get somebody out of an area. Where it becomes interesting, though, is when you have all these air assets, whether they're helicopters and or drones or whatever. We found that we need to have an air boss, basically somebody who just controls where the helicopters and these aircraft go and what zones they're in, so that we don't have collisions and a central location or a communication point. So we have guys in the county that are certified air bosses. He was Morgan Township's chief, Jeff Galloway, Wiemeyer out of Deerfield. And Randy Johan and a couple other folks are definitely trained to the air boss level and have come out to help us out coordinate the air assets, but that is definitely something that we have to get in place pretty quick if we're putting all those assets up. Also, some of those pilots can act as an air bus as well. Vehicle and bikes, it's not that big a thing for here, but we keep it in because of bike patrols. For some of the areas, some jurisdictions use bike patrols, ATVs, UTVs, all that kind of stuff are very helpful. If we call the county out, we can get UTVs out here. The police department, keep this in mind, the Westchester Police Department has a UTV that we can utilize, and they have no problem getting it out to us. So utilize those. They're great for hasty searches, but it's got to be slow. You can't be tearing around in these things expecting to see stuff. So stop often, check drainages, hiding places. Police and firefighters are kind of, we have those, I don't want to say devious minds, but we're good at hiding and things like that. So use your mind. If you think that's someplace somebody might hide, or it might be kind of a good location to hide, check it out. Again, you can use those as attractors or to work on containment, escape points, and the like. It's just a picture of somebody doing a vehicle search. They stopped at the culvert, the drainage to check it out, and lo and behold, they found a very strange looking kid in the woods. So what you see there is he's got his GPS, he's marking a waypoint, and he's calling for additional resources to get that subject some help. Building searches. This is tricky here, right? So these are often overlooked, doing building searches. Now, a locked up residence or somebody, if they say they're not in there, they're probably not in there, right? We don't usually have to worry about that. Abandoned buildings or other reasons that you may have to get involved with. So there are definitely legal considerations, including trespassing and so forth. This is critical that we utilize law enforcement. If we think we need to do a building search, get law enforcement in there with you. And then again, when you search a building, it's just like searching a fire. Be systematic. However you decide to do it, just be systematic and document that, right? Don't forget to check the backyards, storage sheds, pools, underneath decks. We found that one guy in Liberty underneath a deck. And because the crew looked underneath the deck, it almost definitely saved that guy's life. He was already hypothermic and was not responding appropriately. So we could have easily walked past that guy, but they looked underneath the deck and they saved that guy's life. They did a great job. That was up in Liberty Township. Beware of trespassing. We know about that. Involve your law enforcement, and perimeter containment is also a big deal. So if you're searching a building, it's not a bad idea to put somebody on like the Alpha Bravo corner and the Charlie Delta corner. So if somebody bails out a window or whatever, you got them. You've got at least a point of travel, and let law enforcement do the chasing. That's the interview log again. Building searches definitely involve PD. Definitely involve PD. Some equipment that you might consider. Some sort of area familiarization tool, whether it be a map out of the your street guide in the truck or whatever. If you have GPS available to you at that time, it's a great idea to utilize it. Cell phones and radios. Radios, obviously, you're going to be communicating with command and each other on the channels. Cell phones are great, not only from a communication standpoint, but you can pull up one of your navigation programs, your apps on your phone, and have a pretty good idea of where you're at. You can also pull up Google. You guys know how to do this. And Google Earth, Google Maps, satellite view, and you can see what is in the surrounding area right around you too. That's very handy. Survey tape, if you got it, to mark areas. Photos, and what I mean by photo in this case is a photo of the subject that you're looking for. You can utilize your phone for taking pictures of a clue maybe and sending it back in, and then marking supplies and documentation if you need to do a 214. Definitely, I would definitely carry some sort of a pad of paper and a writing utensil to keep track of where you've been and what you found. Additional stuff, this comes more on the command level. Computers, it's very helpful at the command post. What we've done in the past is We bring the police laptop where he's tracking his assets, or she, and the Surface Pro out of the front of the battalion car. And we map them out. We can pull up the different maps and start tracking where assets are and where they're going, as well as then following up on the dry erase boards and maps that we carry in the car for that stuff. Printers, not so big a deal. We can print out different forms and so forth. That comes with the tech rescue truck. Gear with for removal. So that is something to consider. If you're going into Keener Park, for example, to look for a guy who's despondent and has decided to try to drown himself in the creek, that happened a couple of years ago. We had to remove that guy out of there, and luckily the crews brought stuff that they could start the removal process, and then we had to transition to Stokes baskets and stuff like that. But gear for removal, how are you planning on getting this subject out of there? EMS equipment as needed. I'm not saying carry the first in bag on a search, but have assets available to you to get EMS equipment. You might want to carry, if it's cold outside, you might want to carry a hypothermic burrito out of the battalion car. If you think that might be an option for you, that is a good resource for you there. And then anything else you think you need. Water is not a bad plan, to bring a couple bottles of water with you if you can, if it's hot outside or what have you, and go from there. So this is the last little section. It's lessons learned and some of the things that we've found helpful and things that we can improve on. This is not based on any one run or anything like that. So please don't get your feelings hurt if you think you were on a run where something like this didn't happen or didn't go well. It's things that we can learn by and do better in the future. So we beat this to death. Law enforcement is the lead agency, so we have to really work within their parameters. And that can be tricky, which kind of brings us down to the next bullet point, is common radio channel. So one of the things that we found to be very effective is getting everybody onto a TAC channel, right? So we can request a TAC channel through 7Com and bring everybody onto that TAC channel, including police. Police officers are not used to changing radio channels besides their common operating channels. You know, the talk around group and channel 2 and then dispatch, right? So that is difficult for them. That is a challenge. Sometimes you may have to help them out, show them where the TAC channels are located on our radios and all that. So there is some, I'm trying to think of hesitation to switch over to a common radio channel like a TAC channel, but we have gotten much better doing that, getting that together, and that really does enhance our operations. Tracking's better, communication's awesome. Oftentimes the police will find them, and over that TAC channel you'll hear we located the subject, and you can start ramping down a little bit, maybe not being as intense until we definitely qualify that is the subject that we're looking for. We have found subjects that aren't the subjects that we're looking for as our target. So we definitely want to confirm that subject and go from there. They also can call for EMS assets and all that directly over that channel. Search urgency form, we talked about that in depth. There have been instances where, talking with the police commanders or the sergeant or whoever, do we really need to make this call out? Do we really need to get all these people and all these assets coming to us? And by utilizing that form, we can show that, yes, we do, or maybe we don't need to go hog wild and have everybody in the county responding there. The questionnaire, the missing person questionnaire, that's critical. That is something that we've really not done a good job filling out. So that needs to get done every time, really. And choose wisely the person that you want to fill out that form. That person is actually interviewing a loved one or somebody who knows that subject well, right? So sometimes kid gloves and good analytical skills are very critical in that not everybody is set to that stage. For the team, Dave Oakley is really good at that. So we often give him that. He has the gift of gab. He knows how to talk to people. That is the kind of person that you want doing Sorry about that. So work on that. Also, compare that with police notes. So talk to the police and say, hey, here's what we found out on the questionnaire. Does that jibe with what they told you? If you get in a different story, you may need to explore that a little more. Maybe somebody's hiding something. Maybe they forgot something. Maybe they weren't comfortable talking to the cops. That happens, right? Everybody loves a fireman, but the coppers are in a whole nother world, right? So they may be hesitant to talk to you or talk to them, but they may talk to you. So work through that. One of the other questions that's not on here that does often come up is what happens if we find something when we're searching the house or doing a house search for the subject? What we found very effective is when you go in to search the house for the person, tell whoever's house it is, or the resident, the parent, whatever, hey, I'm looking for this person, right? I don't care what else is in there necessarily, right? I'm not looking for anything else. I'm looking for this person. So that being said, if you do find something that you think is questionable or whatever, quietly talk to a police officer and see if that's something that they need to take action on or not. We did have one that the guy was very forward with me, and he said, I told him that we were going to go in and look at his house, go through the house. We're going to look in all the closets. We're going to look under the beds, blah, blah, blah. And he was very forward and said, hey, there's some marijuana in there. There's some dope in there. I told him, I don't care. I don't care if what's in there. I'm looking for this guy. Now you trip into a grow, that's different, right? So, but don't make a big deal out of it. Talk to the PD, talk to law enforcement, whoever, and let them deal with that. You're looking for the guy, the person, the subject, right? Resource tracking has been tricky, right? It's going to be when you're over such a large geographic area, who's with whom and what. So some of the stuff that we found is tracking it similar to a fire, utilizing accountability to the best of our abilities. The police don't have accountability boards. They don't have tags like we have, right? So we have to work around that and track to the best of our ability. And that's where working hand in hand with the police is critical, police command. So what we've done successfully is we've had an overall police commander, was a captain the last time, and a sergeant or a lieutenant. I was a lieutenant. I'm sorry. The lieutenant stayed right there with Battalion 70, and we kept track of where their units were, where our units were, and it worked out really good. It's important to know where everybody is just from a safety standpoint, just like on a fire. Squad size. So this is always a tricky situation because we do have limited manpower, right? Especially in the first little while. We found that 2 guys searching a street is not enough. It really needs to be 2 guys per side of the street. So 4 people should be a minimum. Now, is that always obtainable? No, we're not even trying to fool ourselves and say it's not always obtainable, but it usually is. We can make that work a lot of times. 3 at the minimum with a police officer in the general area. So ideally, it would be great to have a police officer and 4 or 5 people assigned to a squad. And therefore you have your good search squad, a good removal squad, as well as law enforcement backup right there. That's just not real likely, especially in the beginning phases of a major mission. So if we have a police officer in the general area that we can call if we get into something or something doesn't look right, or we get to that backyard and somebody is extremely adamant about not letting us go into the backyard, that's a good reason to involve law enforcement. Should that happen, and that does happen every now and again, don't force your way in. We don't want to get into that situation. Back out, explain your situation, back out and call it in, and then let the police start working on there. The area is not clear until it is ground cleared. So if we're putting a vehicle into the area and it's driving around the neighborhood and basically doing a windshield search, that area is not clear. Okay, and this always brings up people wanting to know why. And the answer is because if you're in the back, if you're in a car, you're in an ambulance, you're in a fire truck driving around, you can't get into the backyards. You're not seeing the overall area. You're not checking the pools. You're not checking underneath decks. You can't get back there. That's why you need your ground pounders, and they need to walk around and check those areas. So UAVs have helped that a lot. You know, on one of the last searches, they were getting hits via FLIR, and we were able to send a car there. They got out of the car and went directly to where the heat signature was and evaluated it from there. So that was very helpful. That would clear the area, but a windshield or a vehicle-based search does not clear that area. So keep that in mind, please. Utilizing the EMA. So what we're doing now is calling EMA very quickly if we're into a search. We call the duty officer via 7COM. They call us back right away on the phone, and we start the process. And they bring a lot of very good stuff to us. They can get things like reverse 911 going once we determine the parameters and all that. They get us UTVs out of the different jurisdictions throughout the counties. They can mobilize Mach 1, which is the big white Winnebago looking thing that's here at fire headquarters, and set up a command center in that apparatus. If you haven't checked that out, I got to tell you, it's crazy. It's got all kinds of good stuff on it, and it is a great platform for both police operations, fire operations, hazmat search, all kinds of stuff. We will utilize that, and it's a great resource. So utilizing EMA assets is going to be huge. They can also help coordinate the UAVs and the drones and all that kind of stuff for air bosses and all that. So that's something that we're doing better at. Then documentation has always been the bugaboo, right? So all these things, the GPS tracks, the missing person questionnaire, we got to get better at doing those. They're in the battalion car. We've added that. Our maps, any Google Pros, map book pages, we take pictures of the command boards and all that, and that gets assembled into a file for the incident, right? And then that also is shared with the police department, who enters that into their in-house system, and we utilize it there. RMS reporting. So on these missions, we can't just go into RMS and say assistant in a search. We really need you to be very specific, or more specific, on what you did, what areas you searched, any challenges that you had, what you found. If you didn't find anything, that's fine. And then what next steps you did. You guys know how to write reports. We just got to make sure that we get that documented in there very well. The other thing we could use is 214s, ICS 214 forms, which is basically a log that you can use in the field very quick to do. There are apps on your phone that you can get for your phone. I have them on mine, that you can type stuff in very quickly and then download it. And we can add that into the report too. That's very helpful. All documentation should be sent in to the battalion so that can be added into the general report, and we can cover our butts like that. That's the presentation for today in a nutshell. I know it's quick and painful, and because we're doing this via Zoom, it is not very conducive to questions and answers. If you have a question, send me an email, shoot me a text, call me, whatever, and I'll try to get an answer for you. And then we'll share that question and answer out to everybody via email or something like that. Those are my phone numbers, and the battalion, you can always call the battalion and they can answer it, or they can get you an answer. Thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it. Hopefully I wasn't too long-winded, and I'm out. Take care. Bye-bye.